Where do we go when we die? Now, this is a question that has been asked by damn near every human being that has ever lived. What happens to us when we die? Does anything happen? Do we go anywhere? And if so, which theory on where we will go is correct? This is a very difficult question to ask and even more so to answer. And many religions have tried to answer this question, the majority of them. And there have been political ideals that have been hostile to this question, saying that even the idea that we go anywhere is basically a way out of taking responsibility here. Now, as far as I'm concerned, I am Hindu. I've met some Hindus that don't believe that I'm Hindu because I have a certain combination of beliefs that I've kind of combined in a way that makes sense to me through the research that I've done into many different religions, most different religions, and the extensive reading of scripture and meditation and practice of the various spirituality in different religions. I've come to form my own concept of what happens after we die. Now, if you are very concerned with your particular idea of what happens when we die, I probably won't touch on it. This is my perspective, and this is going to be a bit of a rant about what I believe happens when we die and how the process continues. Now, if you don't have an open mind to this, feel free to shoot it down in the comment section below, but this is just my belief on what happens when we die. I'm not going to necessarily say that this is just a Hindu belief. Because much of what I believe and much of what I think I understand is a combination of the knowledge that I've learned. Now, in Christianity, there is the idea, not all Christians believe necessarily any one thing, but that Jesus Christ is the Son of God, obviously. In Christianity, there's this idea that somebody can go to hell eternally. Somebody can basically go to hell forever. And if you act incorrectly in this life, you will go to hell forever and be punished forever for somehow a finite crime, which never made sense to me, even when I was going to church, going to Bible study, going to Christian study meetings. That never made sense to me, and I can look back on what I wrote back then and see that that didn't make sense to me at that time. It wasn't like I was convinced that it didn't make sense later. Now, in Hinduism, and this is just the Om symbol in Hinduism. It isn't the symbol for Hinduism. There is no one symbol for Hinduism. But in Hinduism, the idea of heaven and hell are much different. Hell is a temporary place, Narg, to a lot of Hindus. And, Swarg is a temporary heaven, and Narg is a temporary hell. And there are dimensions above, of course, Swarg. Swarg is not the astral heaven. It is not the heaven you go to in order to move on to existences in the causal realm. But I'm getting off topic. Narg is a place that you go to burn off your bad karma. It's a place that you go to in order to work through, what you did wrong, in order to basically cleanse your consciousness so that it returns here. The type of consciousness that is soul returns here. And once again, I'm not speaking for all Hindus. I'm just speaking to certain Hindu beliefs and what I've accumulated and basically initiated in my own belief system. Now, the idea that there are multiple heavens, multiple hells, and everything in between is common in some spiritual faiths, in some spiritual practices, in some spiritual understandings. And I think that there are many, nearly infinite, but always expanding based on time, universes, kind of in this flat circle, just like the Milky Way, but it's not necessarily in a spiral, but you can describe it as being two-dimensional. We have all these material universes of varying levels of developments towards either self-realization that we are all part of God, or lower realization of trying to become individual gods, separate from everyone, gain our own power. And that's the separation between basically dissension and ascension. Ascension is realizing that you're a part of God and that everyone is a part of each other, and trying to realize that for yourself and help others to realize that. Dissension is trying to isolate yourself and make yourself a God separate from everything else. Ultimately, once you get to the greater echelons on either spectrum. Here in the middle, there's a lot of confusion. There's a lot of restlessness. There's a lot of rajas. And I think that even though there are galaxies even in this universe that are either, some are tamasic, which is dark, torporic, conflict, violence, confusion. Others are sattvic in this very universe. Other galaxies where there is a providing for everyone, everyone's needs, and everyone tries to help each other. And then there are rajasic galaxies like the one we're in, where there's a sense of restlessness. There is restlessness here between the forces of tamas, darkness, and greater maya, illusion and delusion, and increasing purity, sattva, getting out of this confusion that we find ourselves in, kind of in the middle. There are varying levels even within this galaxy, and most certainly this universe. Intelligent life elsewhere not being something that is foreign to Hindus. Speaking generally, the idea of life being throughout this universe, let alone the multiverse, and let alone the different dimensions, is not foreign to the Hindu mind, usually. And I believe that reincarnation is really a lot of what happens in between. When you don't do something so terrible, and you don't do something so good, you kind of stay in this in-between spot of reincarnation. If you do something very bad, you might be reincarnated as a different animal, an insect. You have to do something very bad, and to go to the hells, you have to do something extremely bad. And it's not permanent even then, because the whole purpose of this system is to evolve your soul towards God, towards unity that we all began at. And the whole purpose of the multiverse is for God to experience himself. That is the purpose for many Hindus. I'm not going to say all, many. And we have to realize that, chip away at the illusion and delusion until we get back to that unity we're a part of, and all of this is for the experience of God, experience himself. Now, when we do good things, we are reincarnated in better and better circumstances on this earth, because souls are usually, in my understanding of my studying of reincarnation, souls are usually more interested in staying on one planet. When we're reincarnating. It's not necessarily a must, but souls are usually stay on one planet unless they have to move somewhere else, or unless they're really just drawn to one planet for a time, and then they're reincarnated somewhere else. But depending on how well you acted, how much you coincided your actions with Dharma, which means Dharma isn't necessarily about justice. Dharma is more about empathy and growth. When you tried to help people, when you were compassionate for the sake of compassion and not being rewarded, not because people saw you and you're like, okay, I'm going to be famous, just to put it broadly. When you did right because it was right, you're much more likely to be in a good place on this earth. That doesn't mean anybody else can judge you for being where you're at just because you're reincarnated somewhere bad, because that ultimately actually hurts them. If we judge somebody, say, okay, well, you're in that terrible position because you were reincarnated there because you did something bad, then that actually hurts our own karma, and we're more likely to be dragged to that station. So it's not our place to judge. But if you do something very good, you're going to be in a better situation on this earth. If you do something bad, you're more likely to be in a much more terrible position on this earth. And those are kind of the in-between points that we find on this planet when it comes to humanity, not necessarily above or below. And I'm speaking just basically on this plane of existence, the material plane. Now, even gods, even angels, they have to come back to material existence in order to progress spiritually. Gods and angels don't always just go on to being greater and greater gods until they become one with God. There is a necessity to come back to a place of freedom of choice and not just pure access of power, or complete depletion of power, or complete, certainty of goal, certainty of realization. Because when you're something like a god, You're not to the level of the spirit beyond creation, which is that unity. We're all working towards that true and ultimate oneness, that infinite oneness. You're still serving a purpose, but depending on how you act as that godlike being, there's different words for gods, there's different names. Then you either kind of ascend to a place where you're more in a place to be enlightened here, or you descend to a place further and further down to where you are in a place where it's going to be very hard for you to, once you become completely material once again, to become enlightened. But sages, Krishna, Christ, Siddhartha Gautama, Shakyamuni Buddha, in other words, they are actually above the gods. They are pieces of God's consciousness in material form. They have been isolated, but they are still that pure gold that has been removed of impurities. There's no impurity in them. They're just a piece that was sectioned off to come and help us here. And there are many avatars. They're not the only avatars. There are many, many avatars. As many as it takes for God to help us towards our goal. And there's many avatars on other planets in this universe, maybe even galaxy. And there are many avatars in the different multiverse planets. And I usually think of dimensions as a little bit higher and lower than the universes surrounding ours, but that's just my understanding. Now, the whole purpose of the system is for us to truly see ourselves, to find who we are, to have a moment in soul that seems like we are confined to a certain understanding, and when we use that understanding to the greatest benefit, that's when it becomes the correct experience that we have worked so long to achieve, and that the kind of butter churn that is this galaxy or universe or multiverse is churning to produce that realization that every soul has, and soul is behind everything. I mean everything, not just life. It's almost as if every single soul is like a butter churn, and all of this multiverse activity and reincarnation and karma and dharma is meant to produce that pure butter out of the milk. And we can either embrace that churning, or we can look down on it and say, no, I want to be a God that's more powerful than others, to be separate, and that's the way to fall, to descend. Now, I've gone on quite a while in this video, so I don't want to go on for another minute or two. So I'm gonna go ahead and say this is my idea of what happens when you die. You might go to a lunar, that's what we call it in Hinduism sometimes, a lunar heaven or hell in a way, and they're temporary. And there's no permanent hell, but the astral heavens, they are the ones where you actually are making progress up, and the lunar heavens are more of just a reward before you return here to continue on your journey. But when I say heavens in the astral realm and hells in the astral realm, these are still places of activity. But in the material realm, and all the universes that surround the material realm, that are in the material realm, these universes are where the most free choice is accessible, and we're the most free to act. And I don't have to describe the different hells and heavens. That's not pertinent to this conversation. But I hope this rant has been useful to you. This is what I believe happens when we die, and kind of the hierarchy of what happens when we die, and the different dimensions and universes. But feel free to ask any questions in the comment section below. If you ask politely, I will answer. Once again, many Hindus will not agree with me, and probably most people in other religions will not agree with me. But these are my ideas, and these are the beliefs that I've accumulated, and I've come to understand through many different spiritual texts and contemplation and meditation. So if you like this video at all, feel free to hit that thumbs up down there, and I will be more than happy to see you in the future.